Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Waddington. I'm a criminal defense attorney. And today I'm pleased to be joined by my wife and law partner, Alexandra Gonzalez-Waddington. It's been a long time, and we've been talking about doing this podcast. So I appreciate you joining me on our first episode.
It's my pleasure. So what are we going to talk about today?
So I think something that's important that the listeners hear about is really this influence of what we'll call wokeism or being woke on military justice and the court-martial process, including boards and juries. Because, we've had a couple cases, you and I, over the past couple months, where we've seen this wokeness creeping into boards and court-martials.
So we're talking about like what woke jury? We just had that happen to us in that case that we did in Germany when we were doing the jury selection, which was a pretty big deal.
We were doing jury selection for a senior NCO, and we get to the jury and we're thinking, oh, these are going to be a bunch of older gentlemen. They were of various races, black, white, Hispanic. And we were thinking these are people who've been in the Army for 25 years. We're going to get an old crusty jury. But what did we encounter? Surprisingly.
Well, what I was expecting was that we would get a jury full of people that would be reasonable people. First of all, our client was a senior NCO. So the members of the jury, or what would be the panel members, right? They were higher ranking. We had officers, a lot of officers. And you'd expect that they would be more open to reason and to, believing in due process and the due process rights of our clients. But unfortunately, what we're dealing with is what I call, I guess Michael and I call it the woke jurors. So a lot of these people who've been sitting on that panel have gone through sharp training. They've gone to these, it's almost like they're conventions where they're trained to, and I mean, the phrase that they use is always believe the victim no matter what. So by the time they get to us on a jury, they're already kind of brainwashed to no matter what, you always believe the victim. You need to be, if a victim says that something happened, you don't even question it anymore. So we're running into that a lot. When we have a full-blown, panel where everybody's been to these trainings and they automatically come out there when you ask them about if you believe that this person that's sitting here as an accused has the right to a fair trial and is innocent until proven guilty. Some of them are raising their hands and saying, well, actually, we believe in victims' rights, and, if a victim said that something happened, it's likely that something happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's a way you would think to get people off the jury. But the problem is whenever you have 16 people on there, senior officers enlisted, and 80% of them raise their hand and tell you that they've been taught that you should believe all victims. They just came from a training where they all sat around and listened to speeches by alleged victims. It was like a pep rally for victims. Like, that's what it is. Think of your high school pep rally for victims. And what they're trying to do is get ahead of, they're trying to tamper with the juries, really, because they come in and they start giving statistics. They start attacking what we are going to argue as lawyers, which is due process, right? So innocent until proven guilty, they're being taught at these pep rallies for victims that not only you should believe all victims, but anyone who tells you that false allegations occur are lying, they're exaggerating, they're victim blaming. So then they give them these statistics, which I don't even know where they got these statistics, but basically, like, there's no such thing as a false rape allegation. There's like 1 in 1,000 or something like that. And they're telling these people that. So when we're standing there arguing that this is a false allegation or there was consent, they have a preconceived notion that your guy's guilty.
Well, so they come in with a preconceived notion already that if our guy is sitting there accused of something, it's because he did something. So they're already in there with that mindset. Unfortunately, it's what we're running into a lot. Doesn't mean that you can't win a trial. It's almost like it is shifting the burden to us as defense attorneys where we have to basically get in there and feel like we have to get in there and prove our client's innocent, which is not what our job is supposed to be, right? As defense attorneys, our job is to hold the government's feet to the fire. Our job is to make the prosecutors and the government do their job, and their job is to prosecute criminals. So they have to do their job, and we want to make sure that our clients' rights are fully covered, are fully protected, and that we can obliterate the government's case if they didn't do their job, if they don't do it. But when we're encountering a panel that's coming in and is already, has already gone to training, has already gone to conferences, has already gone through, and one of the jurors that we had in that particular case that I'm thinking of, I mean, he had already gone through how many sharp, three sharp
Yeah,
trainings?
three 40-hour blocks. Aside from the pep rallies, he volunteered for three 40-hour blocks as a victim advocate, and he still was fighting to stay on, and the prosecution was fighting to keep him. Well, I can be fair, although I spent, what was it, like 12 years of his
No, the
military
last
career.
tour he did, he had volunteered. He volunteered to be, in that train, just so that the viewers, whoever's watching this, gets an idea. Because this is not jury selection, from a jury of your peers, like it would be in a state court. Who actually selects this panel? Who puts them on there? Because they're like, they come back and they come back. It's usually the same people. And then we get to pick from that specific pool. But who picks that pool?
Well, I mean, who picks the pool is the convening authority with the SJ and the prosecution. So the staff judge advocate is the head prosecutor, and the staff judge advocate is like a colonel usually who is advising the general. That SJ, staff judge advocate, runs all the prosecutions as of now for the convening authority, for the general or the admiral. So they pick the jury, they pick the boards, they determine who's being charged. Going back to the woke thing, I was shocked in this last jury trial that we did, the one in Germany. The prosecutor said, who will have a hard time convicting a man with just one witness? And a few people raised their hand. Half them, probably out of 16, 10 of them didn't raise their hand. So they would have no problem convicting someone based on the word of a person, one person alone with no other corroboration, which goes against the law. But in the ones who said, yeah, I'd like to hear something other than one person.
And the prosecutor was right, exactly. Then they tried to get rid of those because they wanted to be able. So in the particular case that we're talking about is a case where we had it's a typical he said, she said case. It was nobody else present. It was a man and a woman engaging in sexual intercourse in the privacy of his home. And so it was her word against his word. And the prosecutor was trying to feel out from the jurors, who would feel comfortable convicting our client based on only her word and no other witnesses, because they weren't planning on bringing anyone else in because they really didn't have anything else. They didn't bring investigators. They didn't bring the CID agents who did the investigation. They didn't bring in the German Polizei who did an investigation and found that basically it was unfounded. They didn't bring in a SANE expert, any type of sex rape kit. They were banking on the woke jurors to find against our client on the word of one female, because she was a female who was alleging that she was a victim. And that is what we are encountering.
You may be saying, what's that have to do with being woke? Well, here's how that becomes woke is that you go to a pep rally for victims. You're brainwashed into what victims do and what they are and how they are.
Counterintuitive victim behaviors. And, if she does this, she's a victim. If she does the opposite, she's a victim. Men and women, because, both they claim, anybody can claim that they're a victim. This idea in this political climate that if I don't side with somebody who is claiming to be a victim, and we're not saying that there aren't people out there who are victims of crimes, there are, but we're encountering a lot of false victims these days. And so if you're in a position of power and you're in a political climate where you plan on rising up in the ranks, or you want to, continue to stay at your job and maybe not have people outside your door picketing, then you're going to feel like you have to basically go towards the side of a victim, even in a case where there is little to no evidence that the person who has been accused of a crime actually committed a crime. And that's a problem that we're facing. That we're
So,
facing a lot.
so people may be wondering, well, that sounds like an easy case. Well, it isn't, and because this is what we've been facing over the past year or two, we're seeing it more and more. They don't call the investigators. They don't call anyone who collected physical evidence, forensic, scientific evidence, DNA, nothing like that. This is where the wokeness comes in. It's where they call one person, the person cries, then they call 5 of their friends and family members to say she was crying, she was upset, she was different, she wasn't acting normal, or whatever. And half the time that's BS anyway. But they call these people in to be like, oh my God. And then they argue, why would someone ever put themselves through this? That's reasonable doubt. So they're relying on emotions, not facts. Many people have said it's facts that matter, not feelings. In a court martial, it's becoming a feelings contest, which is making it very, very stressful for us. I mean, we won the case in Germany, but I mean, the jury was out for a while,
It was like
and
5 hours. It
and I
was
was like,
something
what is going on
ridiculous.
here? Like that
Right.
should have been a 30-minute acquittal.
Right.
And the whole case was based on why would someone ever do this? Victims
And
don't
then when the
lie.
jurors came back, some of them looked like they were red in the face. And I mean, clearly, we didn't stick around to find out, to try to poll them, but clearly there was arguing going on in there. So, I mean,
It wasn't a slam dunk. And so that's
no.
why, when people say, oh man, this is a he said, she said, I say, well, that's a worst case scenario, because if it isn't a he said, she said, and there's various witnesses and we have all the messages, all the text messages, all the photos, then I have something we can work with. But when it comes down to a contest of feelings and a bunch of jurors who have been brainwashed and drank the Kool-Aid of believe everyone, women would never lie, statistically, false allegations never happen. If they believe that and they get on the jury, then you're looking for trouble. I mean, you're in trouble. And so you need to come up with innovative ways to show, to argue and present and show that the government has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Again, I think that case 5 years ago, that would have been a 15 to 20-minute not guilty verdict
Right,
instead of
but
5 hours.
not with what we're dealing with now. And then here's the other problem that members, well, members in the military are facing when they do get charged with a crime or they get accused of something. Investigators do their investigation. At some point, the trial counsel is going to review the report that the investigators, prepare. But if it is a sexual assault case, it's not just a trial counsel anymore. Now it's going to be they changed the name, but it was a special victims prosecutor. Now it's called something else. But that person comes in there like this guy did in Germany, as the white knight, the warrior for justice, whatever they want to, call themselves, for justice for the victims' rights. And he comes in there and they're basically cheating. And he's trying to do everything he can to win his case, not because he's seeking justice, which is what I question, right? What is he doing? He's doing it because he's there with ego, and he's been given this badge where senior victim prosecutor, and he's there to defend and represent victims. And he goes in there and he'll do it. They will try to do anything to win. So at all cost, right? So they go in there and they cheat. We had a situation where there was a 5-minute recorded conversation between our
7,
guy. Was it 7 minutes? I'm sorry,
7
you're
minute
right. It
window.
was 7 minutes because I pointed that out when I saw it. I'm like, what? So it was a 7-minute recorded conversation, and they played the last 2 minutes of it, where our guy is basically, at this point, he's at wit's end, and they didn't play anything else. So the jury doesn't know what all transpired in the previous 4.5 minutes, just the last 2 minutes of the conversation where he's telling the the victim slash accuser is what she was, where he's telling her that he's going to kill himself. Of course he is, because he's terrified. He knows it's an allegation like this will not only ruin his career, but it has the ability to threaten his livelihood, his freedom. He could potentially be a sex offender for the rest of his life. He has children. And in the military, when now you have extra prosecutors brought in and the victims get special victims counsel assigned to them. And let me tell you, in this particular case, we had great defense counsel working with us from the TDS office, but that's not always the case. We'll get attorneys assigned to cases to assist us with this that they don't want to be there. They're not interested in being defense attorneys. They'd rather be at a barbecue with the SJA's office and celebrating a farewell for a paralegal that's leaving. So trial defense services in the Army, and if it's the ADC's office and the Air Force and so on and so forth, I think that they are understaffed. I don't think that they obviously get the support that the trial counsel, the prosecutors, and now special victims prosecutors are getting. So they're kind of outgunned. They really are. Moving off from the woke topic, it's something that is going to affect defendants and accused rights to a fair trial. So not just now we have issues with the jury, now we have issues with how the government is basically preparing their prosecutors and their teams to attack people who are accused of crimes, to the point where they're not even doing actual investigations or making sure that our client could potentially be guilty. They don't care. At this point, it's like a rubber stamp. You've been accused of a crime, a sexual assault, forget it. It's over. They're coming after you with everything that they have.
I want to jump back to the woke thing. We've been talking about this idea of bullying. They added bullying to a reason to kick people out in the Army, and it's in all the branches. But I wanted to bring up what is bullying, so you can be aware of what is bullying in the modern military. And in this case, I'm going to reference it's AR 600-20, and this is what our most recent client, who was a West Point commissioned officer, top of his class over there, and he went down to Fort Benning for the Bullock. And the ruck march happened. There's a dispute amongst lieutenants over the ruck march, whether people should fall out or whether they should pick up the pace. This guy told one person to F off, go back to worry about her platoon. And it turned into an EO complaint, which turned into an investigation, which turned into a board. And the board was for bullying. And you may be thinking, what does that even mean? So I have the regulation here, and I just want I want to read this to you and discuss this with you and inform some of our viewers, because you're probably doing some of these things, and they will kick you out of the military or try to if they feel like it for this. They define bullying as the exposure of an individual or group to physical or emotional. Okay, I get physical. If you're beating the crap out of someone, emotional aggression with the intent to cause some sort of distress or harm. And it goes on to say that it can be ridicule, it could be against comments or statements against someone who is different or weak. It could even be indirect, meaning that you're not even trying to, you can make a comment about, man, the Army used to have standards. We can't pass the PT test. And if someone's feelings are hurt, you just bully them. So this is a subjective test, and it comes down to how the person feels.
I mean, it's subjective. There's no real way to measure that. There really isn't. It's going to go on feelings once again. We're dealing with the armed forces. Okay, this is the United States Armed Forces, and now you have officers and NCOs and soldiers, sailors who could be great members of our armed forces, but now could be kicked out because somebody felt that their feelings were hurt, or that they're being bullied.
Let me give you an example. So the first one is physical assault. Okay, that's a crime. It's an assault. I don't even know why it's underneath bullying. That's a crime under the UCMJ, assault and battery. But the one that I think is a catch-all and that they used against our client is teasing, name calling, mocking, taunting, social exclusion, manipulating, isolating. So if you have some dirtbag soldier who's antisocial and is always being negative, and you don't want to bring him out to have a beer as on with your buddies,
That could be
that's
considered
a crime,
isolating.
right? Um, I mean, they used to call back even in the JAG school. I mean, I had a nickname in the Deuce, uh, and all of our squad members. And this is the JAG school. Okay, this is like not really super Army. It's a bunch of Army lawyers. Half of them just got commissioned into the Army. So we all had names for each other. It was fun. I remember those days with fondness. But like them calling me in the Deuce because I would always hit the Deuce before PT. That was just a funny nickname. But imagine if I could have had those people charged, and I could probably get some sort of disability for psychological PTSD.
Hmm.
Here's another one: spreading
Hmm.
rumors. We've had a couple cases recently like this where people have spread rumors, meaning that they talk to other people about other people, and people's feelings got hurt, and it ends up at a board. I've never seen this go to court martial yet, but it's been at boards. So
Well,
what I mean, what do you think about this idea that you call someone a name, you tease them, you don't want to hang out with them, you can be separated from the army with another than honorable for that?
yeah, I think the pendulum has swung so far to the left that there is no room for common sense anymore. And when we're dealing with the armed forces, people in the armed forces who have to be ready to go, at a moment's notice to defend our freedoms, to defend our rights, to protect our country and their fellow soldiers and service members. I think that people up on high who are sitting in little offices are coming up with laws and rules and regulations to appease uh, people on maybe one side of the spectrum, and they really aren't thinking about national security or about the human experience in general. I mean, we're to be able to criminalize something like that. It goes it makes it a very uncomfortable work environment for anybody. I mean, it's going to be hard for even team building, to be able to become friends with somebody and make a funny joke, and maybe somebody else didn't find that funny. Or I'm not talking offensive things, I'm not talking being racist or mistreating people outright. I think everybody needs to be treated. I think if everybody was treated or treated people with dignity and respect on a daily basis, a lot of these issues that we're seeing nowadays would go away. But to try to criminalize or to punish um, service members who would otherwise be potentially excellent leaders and people in the military community who could go on to do great things. I think that that somebody somewhere is trying to appease a mob, quite frankly, and it's not going to end well.
You know when this was written? This was interesting. At the height of America's social justice revolution, this new regulation and this bullying was added in July of 2020. So COVID hit, we
There's
had
a lot of craziness going
rioting
on.
and everything. That
Yeah.
was like the peak of, they wanted to defund the police. Everything was about feelings. Everyone was depressed and all that in the media. So they brought in social justice warriors in lobby groups and psychologists, like from Berkeley and Harvard, probably, to write these things. So
And so people in the positions of power, and we're talking like in Congress and the Pentagon, I mean, they are succumbing to the pressures of, the media or the pressures of certain lobby groups. It's like I said, there's no common sense, and when you're dealing with, certain entities, whether it's the Navy, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Army, it's a community, and there's people, and they have to be able to interact with each other without having to be afraid of anything that I might say. Maybe, it could be something that I would think is just a normal joke. Maybe somebody over there who believes that they're I'm going to say who identify as a cat, for example, might get offended. And this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with, I mean.
It's kind of it's all of the branches are having trouble recruiting people. We're at the worst right now than we've been in many, many years. Our military can't recruit high quality candidates.
We've been in some times of peace for quite some time, but if you're in a situation where you are dealing with a war, a battle, your life is on the line, your friend's life, you should be able to feel like at some point you could joke around with your battle buddy, or you could, kind of let loose a little bit without cutting into the morale of the group or the unit, without trying to be mean spirited or to, hurt anybody's feelings or alienate anyone. But you should be able to feel like you can be yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're at this point where you've already gone through your training, you've already gone through the vetting process. You're all in a team, right? And part of the team spirit is to be able to feel comfortable with the people that you're with, that you're trusting your life to, and they're trusting their lives with, to you. So to say now that somebody, kind of on the outside might be able to look in and be like, I was offended by the way that you stared at me. And now you're going to be facing some sort of possible investigation, whether it's a command sponsored investigation or something that could potentially, get you kicked out. And you've served for, let's just say that you've served for 12, 15 years and you've done X amount of deployments. And now, because there's some new rules in place, you could potentially be, facing a discharge because somebody's feelings might have gotten hurt. I mean, it just, they don't even give you they're supposed to give you a fair hearing. You have due process rights, but they haven't been doing that. They've been trampling on your due process rights, is what we've been seeing a lot. So we come in there and we're involved in a full-on fight just to protect the client's rights, and their due process, which is something that's, go ahead.
It's just not men. It's just not men. We did a case with a super highly decorated, super high speed Army officer. Again, that one was in Germany too. And she was running a very high stress job. She was running a hospital section. Mm-hmm. She was doing the work of like about 10 people. And she had a bunch of, in my opinion, dirtbags working for her, didn't want to work. They were using COVID as an excuse to get out of work. And this is a hospital, so they need to be there. They're on TikTok all day. Like one of the people that...
She was heavy-handed. She was too bossy.
Yeah, and so under the Army's rule of bullying, oral or written berating of another. So if I told you, and if I was at E6 and you're an E2, and I said, you were supposed to be a PT, third time you missed this, you're getting a counseling statement. That could be construed by someone as berating you, humiliating you. It's asinine. And so like she scolded someone in that case, scolded someone for being on TikTok all day in uniform with the badge on, posting TikToks that were absolutely inappropriate.
Didn't we do one recently though that the people were complaining about this guy? What was the situation? What was his job and what was the problem with this guy that he...
I mean, the guy's job was making sure that aircraft are maintained as they take off aircraft carriers. It was a serious job. And so he was in charge of the tools. He ran the whole section and he was a really high speed guy. And the problem is he had a few sailors that worked for him that were like literally self-proclaimed social justice warriors that were going to rid the Navy of all the bad apples. So this guy had family members that a very diverse family, both sexually and how they identified everything. It came from
our client did.
Yeah, our client did.
Not the guy who accused him of being everything that he accused. Tell the story, because
this went to a board, but they tried to take this guy's retirement after 18 years. We won the board. One of the things was he had a sailor that came in and said, I have jury duty. And our client says, well, I mean, you should be able to get out of it in Florida, I think, because you're in the military. And the guy says, no, they told me that's not an exception. So he goes on to the Florida website that talks about jury duty, and I think it was Duval County, and it lists all the things that you need to do to show up, like who's accepted, what's appropriate, what's not. And he says, well, military is not an exception, but it says here, if you show up wearing earrings, provocative clothing, and you're, like face tattoos, or not face tattoos, face piercings, they will kick you off the jury. And so he says to the guy, well, you can just go there dressed like that. Go in there dressed in a halter top and put in a nose ring or something like that. The person, the social justice warrior who wasn't even part of that, heard that, and she was offended that he made a comment about people who expressed themselves. So that turned into one of the
right. So she was not part of the conversation.
She was offended.
She heard him say that comment, and then she made the claim against him and filed an EO complaint against him. And next thing you know, this guy who's been in for 18 years, deployed, highly decorated, is now facing a fight for his career. Actually, It started off as they were looking into potential courts-martial charges. I remember that. And then it turned out that they decided not to go that route and instead gave him an administrative.
So they hit him with NJP, captain's mask. He's like, I didn't do it. I'm innocent. And they came back to him like 5 times. Take the NJP.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not taking the NJP. I'm not doing it. And the next thing you know, they're trying to kick him out of the board.
And they kept coming back to him saying, oh, your lawyers are giving you bad advice. Your lawyers are just trying to take your money. Take the NJP. We'll take care of you. This is after they busted him down from chief back to petty officer right before he got paid, like literally the day before.
They didn't even take the time to do any investigation or anything. They were just 100%, this female is making these claims. She feels offended. She feels, that she's being attacked and harassed and, whatever. So we're just going for it. And this guy who's been in for all these years, highly decorated, well-respected, and loved by his peers, is now, his career's on the line.
Yeah, I mean, so what happened is they do an investigation. Mm-hmm. It comes back unsubstantiated pretty much. Said, just give them guy counseling. Well, the social justice warrior, who's getting out of the Navy, by the way, right now, she turns around and she keeps escalating it. She keeps bringing it up to the chief's mess and going up the chain of command. I don't feel this is fair. So they assigned another person who was a JAG was brought in. So if someone makes a false claim against you and they don't like the result, or they don't like you as a person and they just want you out of their life, and the investigation is unfounded, all you have to do is go back and keep reclaiming or adding more. So they did another investigation, done like literally finished right before he got promoted or got paid. So in the Navy, if you get promoted to chief, the chief's anchors vest once you get paid. So they did this all on purpose and half-assed this investigation so that they could take his rank. Then they offered him NJP multiple times. He repeatedly demanded court. And then they're like, how could you turn down, because a mass, and he's like, because I didn't do it and you're going to kick me out and bust me down some more. So we went to the board, and then the board, like, for example, when you said they didn't do their homework, they had no idea that although the victim and her little posse of friends, all of whom refused to testify under oath, they didn't show up. They were all involved in a circle of gun decking. And in the Navy, gun decking means falsifying official records. They were falsifying mechanical aviation maintenance records and lying about it. And they all got into trouble. This is what triggered this all. They all got into trouble for lying and not doing their job maintaining aircraft. And if someone doesn't do their maintenance on a helicopter, for example, people can die. And so what happened was then they threw out this social justice accusation and took our guy out, and their thing just they literally tore up their captain's mast or Article 15s in the other branches because these people were now considered victims.
Well, that is a whole other topic. What the benefits of being a victim in the military. Unfortunately, for real victims, people who are real victims of crimes, I think that all these people that are now looking into scamming the justice system and, becoming victims so that they can get benefits, that's a whole other thing that's going to be, we're going to see a lot of that happening.
And we could do a whole video on that, but I mean,
Mhm.
The so we talked in the beginning. I said we will define what woke is, and my understanding of what woke started out as is it was something in basically African Americans would say be woke, basically be aware of what's happening. Don't be a fool. Keep your eyes open. Stay alert. There's racial injustices, stuff like that. Just be aware of that. What happened was, in my opinion, the ultra libs hijacked that. Like, oh, I'm more righteous. Like I'm going to protect everyone out there because I'm superior. That's kind of how a lot of the ultra libs are, in my opinion. And so they then started showing who is more virtuous than the others, and they pretty much hijacked the term. And as you know, if you turn on the news, it's everywhere, and it takes on its own meaning.
It's really pushed by fear. It's negative. Yeah, it's pushed by fear more than anything else. And the people who are in positions where they're supposed to be panel members or juries are in positions of power, they are afraid of applying, reason and common sense, um, for fear of maybe retribution or being kicked out, or unlawful command influence, or coming out in fear of the left masses, coming at them. And in reality, I mean, the truth, I think that reason is going to be down the middle always. I mean, there's a lot of right wing crazies too, right? At this point, I think what we're seeing, and I know I've said this before, is that the pendulum has swung way too far to the left, and there's no room for that middle ground of what it is, what reason is, and for things to function properly, especially in a criminal justice environment and a criminal justice system. It's either one extreme or the other, is what we've been seeing a lot. And so I think, just to say, as criminal defense attorneys, our role really is to make sure that we walk that path of what is fair and what is just, and what is right, and that we keep the government in check so that they stay within those boundaries and within that line, because anything to either extreme is a problem. To either extreme is a problem. And whereas it maybe at some point, the government might have been pushing so far to the right that it caused this, to swing that way towards the left. But I mean, at this point, we're so far to the left that middle ground is now, not being touched. And it comes up to it's our job, I think, as defense attorneys, to keep that government in check, to make sure that these new potential jurors who are going through these, what I would think is borderline brainwashing, a little cult-esque type of conferences, that those jurors are kind of brought back down to the center where we can discuss why they're there. Everybody in the military has sworn an oath, to protect our country and from enemies, foreign and domestic. And unfortunately, that means also that they have to protect our country against people in government a lot of times. And prosecutors are in that. They're moving forward. They're willing to cheat just to win. And unfortunately, it's our job we have to do more. I think as defense attorneys now, we really have to do more. The burden has shifted. Where not so maybe we don't have to prove our guy's innocence, but we have to remind the jurors why they are there, and make sure that we hold the government's feet to the fire. The prosecutors are coming in to do things that are unethical, immoral, wrong. It's our job to point that out to the jurors and remind them it's not emotions, it's not what you were taught at some conference. Our guy is here, or a woman is here, depending on what we have as a client, but our person is here, and they have a right to due process, and they're innocent until proven guilty, and the government has to do their job. It's not just something that's based on, oh, I feel bad for somebody who might potentially be a victim. I mean, if they don't have the proof, they didn't prove it, period.
And really, it comes down to the Constitution. You know, everyone in the military is sworn to give their life to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Most people in the military have never read it, but if they were to read it, they would find that pretty much what they're swearing to give their life to defend is constitutional due process rights. I mean, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney. You have the right to defense counsel. You have the right to a fair trial, an open trial, innocent till proven guilty. The government must prove their case with strong evidence beyond reasonable doubt. Those are all things that the due process rights that are from the Constitution that you're vowing to defend. So when you have a prosecutor come along or the military that's saying, all that stuff doesn't matter. All the things that I'm supposedly going to give my life to defend, the ones that are doing what I'm saying, they don't give a crap about the Constitution. They give a crap about getting a paycheck, looking good, their ego, and they don't care about the Constitution. So you have to be really careful. And I find that there's a lot of complacency. The more I travel around, and it's not everyone, there are a lot of great, very, very good quality military lawyers that I run into. A lot of them are complacent. They're
just kind of going through the motions. That's true. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going through their motions, they're doing their own thing, and they don't want to go that extra mile. And I think that when the prosecutors and the government's pushing to see how far they can go, oftentimes, especially when we're talking about the military system, where the defense attorneys might be in defense right now. Maybe they'll be there for 2 years. At some point, they're going to have to PCS. They may end up having to work for that prosecutor that they were going against. That prosecutor may become an SJA. And once again, you were in defense. Now you're working for that person. When you want to play nice with them. And it's just easy to just kind of coast through your 2 years and, not make a lot of noise.
If you're facing some sort of charges in the military, you could be going against someone super squared away. You could also be going against someone that will do whatever it takes to put you in jail so they can call their mama and talk about how they got a 10-year conviction on you. They don't care if you're innocent. They don't care if you're guilty. They really don't care. So when you're sitting there with your mom and dad and everyone in the audience in between the breaks, and you're like, my God, how can this guy that I've never met, who's fresh out of law school, some of them, say all this horrible stuff about me and my family, call me a rapist, a predator, call me all these names. The guy never even met me, won't even look me in the eye and shake my hand. And I said, well, because he doesn't care. And for a lot of service members, they have a hard time understanding that guy doesn't care. That guy wants to put you in jail. That guy would put his mother in jail if it got him a promotion. People that are bad, have bad character. It is what it is. They didn't just all of a sudden get bad character. Their character developed over the course of their lifetime. Maybe they didn't have leadership. Maybe they're just bad people. But those bad people, if they're out there, and there are plenty, they will put you in jail and not care. There are bad people with bad character, and they must be stopped.
They walk among us, and they're in positions of power.
They're out there portraying that they're like the good guys, the white knights. And there are good ones and there are bad ones. Our job is to make sure that they follow the Constitution and to stop the bad ones.
That's exactly right. To make sure that the government does their job. I want the government to do their job. I want to be protected. I want criminals to face the consequences. But I don't want that at the expense of people who are not criminals or people who are innocent of crimes to be going to jail, to be facing potential sex offender registration, to be facing potential, the loss of their livelihood and, their being able to spend time with their family because the government isn't doing their job. I don't know. It's unfortunate. I'm seeing it more and more. I do daily consults, and my consults, usually they're about an hour at least. And it's the same story over and over again, what we're seeing. And it's unfortunate, So anyway, I think that's what we have to say for now.
What we have to say about that. I know we went off topic a little bit.
We could keep going on and on and on forever, but and there's a lot of other topics that we'll be addressing over the next, couple of weeks and months, and things keep popping up.
Yeah, and if you have any ideas, anyone listening to this, for topics or anything you'd like us to discuss, contact us or leave the
subscribe. If you have any questions, ask questions.
Yeah. Because there are a ton of things we could talk about that I think people need to know about. We've done a ton of videos about sexual assault and what to expect. Yeah. That's still a huge thing.
Our topic today really just came up because we just recently, as of like 4 weeks ago, did that particular case in Germany where everybody raised their hand and they had been through all this sharp training and conferences. And, that was crazy. And that's what we've been dealing with. So anyway. Exactly.
Until next time,
That's right.
I'm Michael Waddington. This is Alexandra. And we will see you on our next podcast. Thanks for joining us and subscribe below.
Thank you.